2 has entered the podcast.
Welcome back, people, to Player 2 has entered the podcast, and we're bringing you another edition of the Backlog this week. I'm your host, Michael, aka MC Paperstacks, and it's the beginning of the third game we're running through for the Backlog, which is Outriders. So before we dive into the game itself, I want to go ahead and get some housekeeping out of the way. Next week is gaming news, of course, and we're going to have Panda Fox filling in for Player 2. So looking forward to that and chatting with her about everything that's been going on this last week and the upcoming week. And one more thing I wanted to mention. Last week we had a listener question about the mascots that we would put on a Mount Rushmore, essentially, gaming mascots. And I thought we put together a pretty good Mount Rushmore. Full Metal Merc actually weighed in and wanted to mention his gaming mascot, Mount Rushmore, which was slightly different from ours. So he would still put Mario and Pac-Man, but he decided to add in Sonic instead of Master Chief. And instead of Dragon Warrior, he actually wanted to put a Tetramino, or like a Tetris block. And honestly, I was thinking about a Tetris block last week in my head, and I almost went with it. But I was thinking, I kept trying to think mascot. I still think it's a really good representation of gaming. And I mean, there are a few things bigger than Tetris or more ubiquitous than Tetris when it comes to gaming. So I think it's a really solid list. If you guys want to send in your list, feel free, because I think that's actually kind of a cool question that we got. And I'd be interested to hear how people's top gaming mascots would differ from ours. All right, let's get what I've been playing aside from the Backlog game. Last week, we were talking about Bloober Team because they're going to be developing the new Silent Hill 2 remake, and a lot of people have concerns about that, including myself. I remember hearing that Observer was pretty decent, and it was on sale, so I figured, why not check it out? Got down with Observer for a bit to try to see if Bloober's quote-unquote best game, kind of stood the test, so to speak. It's essentially a cyberpunk detective game. I mean, it's really cyberpunk, too. And it stars Rutger Hauer, obvious reference to Blade Runner. I think it was like one of his last roles before he passed away. The game is actually dedicated to his memory. Rest in peace, Rutger Hauer. How can I describe it? I really like the aesthetic. You're obviously augmented. You have to take a pill to kind of, quote-unquote, synchronize every so often in the game, and you start off investigating this apartment because you get a call from your estranged son, and you just kind of immediately launch an investigation because once you get to the apartment, some foul stuff goes down. I'm getting the impression that you spend the entire game in this apartment because as soon as you get in there and the stuff goes down, it goes on lockdown. And I've played for several hours and haven't left the apartment yet. I'm getting the idea that maybe I'm staying there for the duration of the game, but I could be wrong. Of all the genres of gameplay, it really reminds me of like a classic point-and-click adventure game, except for it's 3D. You have two vision modes, aside from your regular vision, that you can switch between. One that's more biometric and one that's more electronics-based. And you can use those vision modes to search for things in the room for clues during your investigation. If there's like a dead body, you might search with your bio eye to see like where the injuries are. You might search with your electronic eye to see what kind of augmentations that they have and if you can glean information from them. The main hook in the game is the fact that as an observer, you can actually kind of hop into people's minds, like basically kind of connect to them and mind hop to interrogate people. And I got a chance to do that once. There was a man that I found that was on the verge of death and he couldn't really speak. So I wanted to get some information from him. So my character got the clearance and connected it to the other guy. Like he had a port. I guess, cyberpunk. Most people probably have ports. And once I dove in, this really reminded me of Bloober's Blueprint, for lack of a better term, because I've played Layers of Fear and I've played the medium, especially Layers of Fear. The mind is very fragmented, which often thoughts are. So as I'm hopping around in his memories, I'm shooting from environment to environment, and it's just kind of like a roller coaster ride of weirdness. Definitely playing with headphones on, you're going to jump a few times because it does have a menacing kind of horror game feel, even though I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as a horror game. These segments, I think, are the most scary, though. There's even some light puzzle elements, the old infinite room thing where when you leave, you go back into it and you have to figure out the right order to go out, and there's contextual clues. It's not anything hard to figure out, but I remember thinking it was cool at first, and then quickly realizing that it was just going on too long. It was preventing me from proceeding in the investigation until I finished it, but there was no end in sight. I just kept proceeding into this man's mind until eventually I was kicked from it because he died. And it's all scripted, so I didn't stay longer than I needed to. I couldn't leave until it let me leave, right? And I didn't even feel like I gleaned much information, but the detective did in true adventure game fashion. Sometimes you glean information that you don't perceive, but then you might log like, okay, so this guy sold drugs to these guys, so that's who I have to talk to next. And that's kind of how I was able to proceed the story. Having Rutger Hauer play the main character, which is like a grizzled old detective, it works in some parts because Rutger Hauer kind of spoke in a low, kind of gravelly tone, but it also kind of felt like he was sleepwalking through the performance. It was very flat, and there wasn't a whole lot of cadence. It was just, he basically grumbled every line. It's like going to a live Bob Dylan concert now versus back in his hey. It's like, if you're a fan, you can kind of hear it, but if this is your first time seeing him perform something, you're like, oh, what's the appeal? And I'm not going to hold too much against him because he was literally at the end of his life. And I think he's done a lot of really good work. I mean, a lot of stuff besides Blade Runner that I really enjoyed. A lot of it was like B-movie stuff. But again, I think he's great. But in this game, not so much. I kind of wish that they had went with a different voice actor for the main character. I understand the drawl of him and his likeness, and it's cool. But it wears thin when you have to listen to him growl all his lines for pretty much the entire game. There's kind of a cool mini game that proceeds throughout your experience, because obviously with a cyberpunk game, you're occasionally going into computers and reading emails and hacking and stuff like that, and everybody has this old school Dungeons and Dragons style dungeon game called With Fire and Sword, Spiders. And it's less a dungeon crawler, more like a puzzle game. It's basically you move one space at a time, and if you get within a certain distance of enemies, they'll start following you with the intent to attack you. And the corridors are usually like one person large. And so it's overhead, and you're like moving along, and basically you need to get from the start to the finish, getting all of the coins in the level, and then reaching like a wizard at the end. And you can pick up a flame sword in some of the levels, which will allow you to attack an enemy in one adjacent square. So the way the puzzle works is you basically want to get all the coins and get to the end and defeat any enemies in your way. It's really interesting how this puzzle progresses. Like the first computer I found, I could do like 3 stages, and the next one a couple more, and the next one another stage. And they get really hard. Like there's a few stages I had to try more than a few times to try to figure out how to get past all the monsters and get the coins. A lot of times it's kiting monsters and then attacking a bunch at the same time with the same attack. And it's a fun little diversion. Like, I guess it's not really as novel as it used to be, but I've always enjoyed games within games, especially if they're unique. And I think it's just a really cool way to switch up the gameplay style to have an in-universe game or, some sort of reason to completely change up the gameplay style for a bit. It's really cool when games do that, and this one's implemented particularly well. It's a decent minigame. Overall, I can't say I enjoyed the game a ton. It's not terrible. It's very slow paced, and I feel almost as if I've seen everything there is to see, but I think I will finish it because I'm just curious to see how the story plays out. Again, you can get a copy brand new for like $20, probably less depending on which platform you get it on. I don't think it's terrible to get. It still doesn't instill in me confidence that they can handle a Silent Hill game, but it also tells me that given the right material, they can still put out a pretty interesting game. So there's that. Speaking of horror games, I also got a chance to play Scorn, and I had talked about that in a few previous episodes that I was looking forward to checking it out. It's kind of awful. If anybody's been following it, they've probably seen the reviews already. It's that H.R. Geiger-esque game where it just seems kind of fleshy and gross. And You basically wake up as this person who, I mean, you can like see underneath the skin and muscle and stuff. So like, I don't know if you're in hell or in purgatory or what's going on. And it starts off well enough. You're kind of exploring the environment, but very quickly it throws puzzles at you. But the way that it designs its puzzles, it doesn't really guide you to which puzzle to solve first. And they have to be done in a very specific order. And the pieces of puzzles are very far spread apart. So you'll go up to a machine and you'll interact with it and try something and then it doesn't work. And you go, oh, there's this thing over here. So you go to another machine, you try something and then it moves something. You go back to the other one and you try it again and it still doesn't work. And then you go to another machine and you try that. You go back and try the different machine. Like I did that probably for a good hour and didn't really get anywhere. And it just wasn't fun. I didn't even get a chance to try out the combat in the game. And I heard the combat's actually pretty terrible as well. But I just lost interest. Because even if the puzzles themselves are simple, the fact that it gives you zero indication of which one to attack first and which order to do it in, but it spreads everything out so much and everything kind of looks the same in the initial environment, it's not fun. Definitely not for me. I don't think I'll be playing more of Scorn unless, I hear otherwise, like, oh man, 5 hours in, it gets kind of good. Because, I'm interested in it aesthetically, but I'm not about to go through all that just to check it out. I'll just go and, play a different horror game for that type of experience. I don't really need to play this. Oh man, I actually played a lot of horror games. As we had mentioned on a previous episode of Gaming News, Enya is a big fan of Dead by Daylight. And she was reaching out to folks this week to see who would play. I was like, I'll give it a shot. It might be kind of fun. I have it on Game Pass, and I probably have it on PlayStation as well, to be honest. I downloaded it, and I was able to play the tutorial, but it just didn't download fast enough for us to actually play, so I think we're going to check it out next week. So I'll probably have more to say about it on the next Backlog episode, but I did enjoy the tutorial. You get to go through as, survivors. There's usually a team of 4 survivors trying to escape an area, get some generators running to open doors, that type of thing. Then you have like a stalker killer that runs around and can take a survivor out in 1 or 2 hits. The goal of the stalker is to like throw you up on a meat hook and don't let anybody save you for a certain amount of time. And then you get sacrificed to this like Cthulhu-esque entity that's at the top of the meat hook that like takes their soul. I don't know. It's interesting. Obviously, the format lends itself well to different horror properties. So if you've ever seen Dead by Daylight advertised, you probably know what I'm talking about because they'll advertise like different types of horror franchises with the Dead by Daylight formula. More to come on that. I think it's definitely playable and fun. I enjoyed the time I had fucking around with bots learning the game and asking Enya questions and kind of figuring out like what to expect when we play it. So more to come on that next Backlog episode. I noticed this game was advertised a lot on Nintendo Switch, released recently, then put on 50% off, and then for Nintendo Switch Online members, it's been given away for a limited time. So occasionally they'll let you download a game for like a week and play it as much as you want. For this particular round, they released a game called OBAKEIDORO? OBAKEIDORO? I don't know. It's OBAKEIDORO exclamation point. Weirdly enough, it's kind of like Dead by Daylight. I got a chance to download and play it on Switch, and in regards to the design of the game and the art, it feels very Tim Burton-esque, or maybe even Tim Schafer, like Double Fine. Kind of like Costume Quest, very cutesy little characters and little ghosties and little monsters that'll chase the characters. So you're like 2 little big head kids. And I think you can have up to 3 kids that are like running around in little graveyard environments. The object for the kids is just to survive a certain amount of time and then you can escape. And for the person that's playing the monster character, you want to like catch the kid and then you automatically throw them in like a little cage. And if you catch everyone, then you win. The cage itself, the kids can release their friends out of it, kind of like, again, Day by Daylight, a survivor can remove somebody off a hook. So it's like a more family-friendly version of that. That said, though, I played it solo because they have solo modes. I didn't really enjoy it. I think there's just something kind of janky about the movement. It kind of highly favors the monster. So if you're playing with 2 bots, I mean, maybe if you're playing with 2 humans, it's probably more fun. And again, it's free to check out for the next few days. Why not? And even then, if you like that type of game, the bar for entry is low. At 50% off, I think you can get it for like $10. I didn't personally enjoy it. I found it kind of boring, but whatever. It's out there if that's your thing. And the only other game I've been playing the last couple of weeks, honestly, has been more Arceus. I can't stop. I actually can fill up 2 whole Pokemon boxes full of shinies. I've been catching so many shinies. I have a lot of extras too, but a lot of the groups that I've been in, they don't really seem to be interested in trading anymore, so I'll probably hop on Reddit to do that. But if anybody listening is still playing Arceus and you have shinies to trade, hit me up. I definitely am interested in doing that. Okay, I should have just finished talking about Pokemon Legends Arceus. I'm adding this in post because while I was recording, I completely forgot to talk about Ring Fit Adventures. Oh my god. It has not been great. I luckily have not gained any weight. I've lost a few ounces, not really pounds. I injured my back. I feel like more than once, more than a few times, I've talked about trying to exercise and injuring myself. It just gets worse and worse. I don't know if it was like running in place really fast on a hard basement floor, because I have carpeting, but it's replacement carpeting from when it flooded, and it's cheap, and I hate it. That's a whole nother story. But the way you have to jog in place and get in sync with the game, you have to go a lot faster than you think you would. So at one point, I'm just flash dancing, trying to go faster because the game adds in more incentives for you to go fast. Like enemies start chasing you, and if they catch you, they'll take your coins. There are sections where, you're like knee jumping to go up stairs or through like marshy bogs, stuff like that. Somewhere along the way, I just did it too intensely and damaged my back, and it sucks. So I am going to tentatively try to go back into it a few times in the coming weeks. Hopefully I can get back on that horse and keep traveling through. The game keeps unlocking features and continues to be a lot of fun. My only complaint is since they started color coding exercises and I've unlocked more, I can only hold so many exercises in my repertoire to battle with at a time, like equip. And I feel like that's an arbitrary limitation because a lot of the exercises have different power levels or attack, a single enemy versus multiple enemies. Now that they're color coded, you want multiple of each color depending on which enemy you're fighting. And for whatever reason, the game just decided that you can only carry, I think it's around 6 or 5, it might even be 5 exercises at a time. So as you get new ones, you have to kind of swap in and out, and you're not getting the same exercise every time, which is good, but I feel like you would already be able to switch it up even if you had access to all of your available exercise attacks. You know what I mean? I don't know. Just saying. So more to come on that, hopefully, if I can figure out a way to stop aging. All right, let me insert this in, and right before the backlog segment, we'll launch right into that. All right, without further ado, I think we need to get to the main event, the backlog game, Outriders. Now, I thought this was recommended by gamer friend Jack, but then I thought about some more, and it may have been Tim. He was going to join me today, but we got our wires crossed on the scheduling, so I might have him on the next episode. But essentially, Outriders, I mentioned it, I think, in the last backlog episode. It's a multiplayer game. Up to 3 people can play together. You just kind of go through levels and tear shit up. There's a really big progression tree for skills. You gain like a handful of skills as you level up, and you can have up to 3 equipped. And depending on if you're playing with a team or solo, obviously some skills will make more sense than others. The cooldowns are quick on them, so you get to use them pretty often. I mean, imagine if like you were in a regular third-person shooter, like a cover shooter, but you had weird powers, like you can throw pillars of flame that track enemies, or you can spawn a turret out of nowhere, or imbue your bullets with poison or vulnerability or debuffs, blight, stuff like that. It's pretty cool. I'm going to catch everybody up on the story for those who are playing along. I'll put a timestamp starting the story and then starting my thoughts on the game overall and the gameplay. So that way, if you don't want to get ruined, you won't if you still want to listen to the rest of it. To be honest, though, Not a big fan of the story personally, at least so far, but I'll get into it. Let me just quickly give the background here, straight off the wiki, baby. During the middle of the 21st century, Earth has passed the point of no return as climate disasters grow more frequent and dangerous, surpassing humanity's ability to mitigate them. The major governments of the Earth combine their resources under the newly formed Enoch Colonization Authority, or the ECA, in a last-ditch effort to preserve humanity on Enoch, a distant Earth-like planet that we found. 2 massive colony ships, the Caravel and the Flores, are built, each holding 500,000 colonists, so 1 million of our best apparently made it, or probably more than likely 1 million of the richest. Despite the Caravel suffering a catastrophic explosion in the middle of construction, the Flores successfully reaches Enoch's orbit in 2159 after an 83-year journey. The first humans to set foot on Enoch are the Outriders, a team of elite soldiers tasked with scouting the landing zone and paving the way for the colonists. However, the Outriders quickly discover the anomaly, a massive and deadly energy storm, and the Outriders attempt to warn the ECA to abort the colonization until they can investigate further, but ECA leadership instead send their own security forces to silence the Outriders, basically kill them. One of the Outriders, your main character, the person you're playing as, you survive exposure to the anomaly, but you're mortally wounded while fighting off the ECA, and you're put back into cryostasis by a character named Shira Gutman, one of the engineers that landed on the planet with you. After some time, you're awakened from cryostasis. It's been 31 years since you were put to sleep, and you find that the ECA's attempted colonization has completely failed, with the anomaly destroying all of the colony's advanced technology and trapping all of the colonists within the confines of a single mountain valley. Beset by hostile alien wildlife and left with dwindling resources, the colonists split into a massive civil war, pitting the remnants of the ECA against the insurgents, militant rebels who seek to overthrow the ECA. In addition, people who have survived exposure to the anomaly, like the main character, have become what people call altered, mutated humans possessing supernatural powers. The main character manages to reunite with Shira, now the de facto leader of the ECA, who tasks the Outrider with fighting against the insurgents and eliminating their altered. So you're fighting against other soldiers occasionally who have powers similar to yours, and they perform mainly like bosses and mini-bosses. Shira then explains that she and a scientist named Dr. Abraham Zahidi are trying to trace the source of a mysterious signal originating from the other side of the anomaly. Having recorded the exact frequency of the signal when they first landed, you'll be heading out to meet Zahidi, and then he reveals that he possesses the last satellite uplink capable of connecting to the Flores, which is that old colony ship, as it remains in orbit with half of the colony's supplies. If the colonists can relocate to an area safe from the anomaly, they can establish a new colony and hopefully start over. At the point that I stopped the game, we were doing several missions traveling with Zahidi, just to a number of hazardous environments, I'm guessing in search of that signal. And that's kind of where I cut off the game when I arrived at Trench Town, which is one of the colonies that have been set up. The story seems pretty simple, even though it's got a very long and storied background. It's our Earth, it's our people, it's much further in the future. Earth can't sustain the numbers. We've heard the story a million times. We found a planet that, by all accounts and all investigations and readings, would support life. But once we get there, things go south. After you wake up 31 years later and you find everybody's just at each other's throats, you're thrust into trying to figure out a way to get more supplies to stop people from fighting over everything and hopefully start civilization again. I don't find the story that compelling. I feel like it's really just a backdrop for the gameplay, which is great. Like, I really enjoy playing the game. I'm not as much propelled by the story, and I find myself dozing off when people are talking about it or looking at my phone because I don't really care. You know what I mean? Like, There are some interesting dialogue here and there and some interesting parts. There's this whole side mission where you find old artifacts from Earth and bring it to a historian. And it could be like Beastie Boys albums or almanacs, encyclopedias, stuff like that. I mean, cool, I guess. The beginning of the game, the prologue, before everything kind of goes crazy and you get your powers, it feels a little like Mass Effect. And I kind of enjoyed it, but I feel like they put a lot more in the opening than they do the rest of the game, at least so far. Maybe it picks up, maybe I'll enjoy the story as I get further in, not sure. The gameplay itself, like I said, is a lot of fun, but it's definitely designed with multiplayer in mind. The more you level up and the further in the game you get, the higher of a tier of difficulty you get access to, and the higher tier that you fight in, the better the rewards, the better the loot, the better the experience and all that. So obviously you want to fight on the highest tier that you can. I was able to play with some friends, Tim, who I believe recommended the game, Nerdy, he was on there, friend of the show, and I was able to kind of enjoy fighting among friends, and that's really the best way to play this, I think. I had, in order to get to Trench Town, to play on my own some nights, because I just couldn't find anybody to play with, our schedules didn't line up. And playing by myself, there were sections I had to do over and over and over again because I just had to do them perfectly, because the difficulty really ramps up when you're the only person drawing aggro from all the enemies that basically monster closet into a level. So I wouldn't recommend it if you don't like playing online. It really does shine when you're playing with friends. Unless you're just a person who loves to get your ass kicked. And I'm sure that there are builds out there that, help you play solo a little better, but it's an uphill battle. Just, go into that knowing that. I chose, out of the different classes that you can be, I chose a Technomancer. So I was able to generate heavy weapons out of thin air, like rocket launchers and Gatling guns and turrets and rockets. I can imbue my weapons with status-inducing ammunition to help take enemies down. I got an ability where I could heal, and I could use that to heal the entire team or just myself. So there's obviously some synergy between working with a team versus working solo, but again, a lot easier with the team for sure. There are a lot of little gameplay elements that I really like, a lot of quality of life features, as far as, knowing where to go. You can press a button like up direction and a line will just kind of go out from you towards wherever you need to walk for your next mission. The map itself locally is fine. You can see where all your stuff is, but when you need to travel to another point to turn in a mission or figure out where you need to go for the next mission, if it's outside of your map, that's a little wonky and I'm not really a big fan of it. You can auto loot everything in the area with a touch of a button, which is really nice. So if you're playing with friends, you don't have to slow everything down by stopping and picking everything up. It just comes straight to you. You have options to sell in bulk, to dismantle your equipment in bulk, to only pick up equipment of a certain rarity, that type of thing. There's all these little tweaks that you can do. You can dress up in any equipment design that you want once you picked up one of its like, and still keep your current equipment's buffs and stats and abilities. So you can get any kind of look that you want as you collect pieces, which is really cool. I love that. I think this experience has taught me that a multiplayer game like Outriders is probably not the best thing for the backlog. So for anybody who is looking forward to doing more multiplayer games, I'm sorry, but I don't think we're gonna. And it's just because with the book club aesthetic, it's about reading a book, right? And then getting together to talk about it. But with the book club, you don't have to read the same thing at the exact same time along with somebody else in order to get through it. You can read in your own time, in your own schedule, and that makes it easier. I found that it was really tough for me to get with people to be able to reach the point that I had set for myself to discuss this game. Because again, some nights I'd just be, hey, who's playing Outriders? Dead silence. I got nothing. And there are other times where there was more than enough people to play, and then so somebody had to be left out. So it was just kind of wonky in that respect. I think moving forward, I'm going to continue to do single-player games or games that you can easily get through solo, even if it does have multiplayer. So that way, if we need to separate at some point, it's easier to do, and the gameplay doesn't hinge so much on having people play with you. Plus, no knock against multiplayer games, but I feel like the story is always much better when it's single-player focused. I feel like this story probably would have been more interesting had it been more of a focal point, but clearly the focus here is just tearing shit up with your friends. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But again, I'm playing through this. The story's not really lighting me on fire. There's only so much I can say about shooting people in the face, right? That said, I made a commitment to beat this game, and damn it, I will beat this game. So, 2 weeks from now, here's the goal. We will be playing up through the point that we unlock a mission called Retaliation. Jakob, he's a buddy that'll kind of drive you around to different points on the main map, like the hub world. When you are at the main mission Retaliation, where he has to help you head through the edge of the forest, quote unquote, that's where we're stopping in the next 2 weeks. That will be the second third of the game, and then after that, we'll have the final stretch of the game to go. So we should be able to knock Outriders out in 3 Backlogs episodes. Today being the first. Alright, so for those interested, that's how far we're going if you want to play along at home. And again, if you want to hop on the show to chat the backlog game that you're playing, or if you just want to chat games in general, it's an open invitation for anybody who listens, anybody in the Discord, anybody that has games they're currently playing that they want to hop on the show and talk about. This is open forum for that here on the backlog. Feel free to reach out to me at any point if you feel like you want to join in on that. And I think that about covers it for this week. So we're going to take a quick break to give it up for the sponsor, and I'll be right back to close it out. Don't go nowhere. It is ad time, so let me explain to you. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place.
Anchor has the tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And when you're hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so much more.
It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place, and best of all, Anchor is totally free.
So I need y'all to download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
And we're back. So folks, don't forget, we're uploading new episodes to our hub at anchor.fm/player2 as enter the pod every single Friday. You're either getting gaming news or you're getting the backlog. Gamer Friends, of course, will be releasing a new episode this week, probably very soon. So look out for that in the next couple of days if it isn't already out. Their most previous episode is still up, the spoiler cast for She-Hulk, and the bonus one featuring Elsa Bloodstone. What was it? Night of the Werewolf, I think? I can't even remember the name of the show now, but Marvel stuff. It's good. You should check it out. If you want to find me or Gamer Friends or any of the social media, or more importantly, the Discord where we're having these conversations, check out the link tree in the description that has everything that you need. You can go there and check out our social medias, like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, share. All of that really helps the show out. So if you're a fan and you want to show some love, that's the way to do it. And I have to admit to you folks, and I'm going to say this here because of the 2 shows I'm doing right now, Gaming News and Backlog, this is the least popular one. And of the sections of the show that people actually listen to, this is the least listened to section. So the real ones are listening right now. So I want to reach out to you guys specifically, the real ones who listen past the ad. I've had a rough go of it recently. Just been a lot of cancellations, a lot of roadblocks, a lot of difficulties. I'm still working on a spoiler cast edit for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It's gone horribly. I don't know what's going on with the files that we recorded, but they're just giving me the business. And sometimes I'm wondering if it's worth it. You can really get to focus on the negative aspects of creating or putting yourself out there. You know what I mean? But the thing that keeps me going is the fact that I look, and every single time I put up an episode, there are diehards that listen to every single one. And I know that you guys are out there. And even if you don't reach out to us every single time or comment on every single episode, I know that you're listening. And I want to say that I appreciate you, and you're the reason why I keep going. I'm going to continue to do the show as long as I can, as long as it's mentally healthy for me. I feel like eventually I'm going to hit a stride where things coast a little easier. I think it's just tough sometimes when you feel like you're speaking into the void. But I see you guys out there and I appreciate you. So thanks for listening in. If you want to support us, you can do that monetarily through Patreon. The link is also in the description. I myself, I very much appreciate it. I know the gamer friends appreciate it. We're out here trying to do what we can to share our love of gaming with you in a multitude of ways. We have such variety within the network, and I hope you guys appreciate that. And finally, I'm here. You want to reach out, show support, ask questions, make suggestions. I am listening. Any kind of feedback you have, we're here for it. And I think that's going to be the show. So again, thank you all for coming out and listening. Sincerely, we love you. And I hope to see you next week. Take care.